HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Reconnecting After Isolation, Coping with Anxiety, Depression, Grief, PTSD, and More, by Susan J. Noonan. Read by Kim Niemi. A mental health charity called the Bearded Fisherman has begun a nightly suicide prevention patrol in and around Gainsborough, England, looking for people in crisis due to the coronavirus pandemic. Founded by two men who have first-hand experience with depression, anxiety, and suicide attempts, they are part of Night Watch, an initiative to monitor known suicide hotspots in the area, working with emergency responders and the community. There has been a measurable increase in calls for support and their crisis services as the community struggles through the coronavirus pandemic. The situation in the Gainsborough area reflects the larger mental health strain across Britain and the world. Research has shown a rise in reports of loneliness, a particular concern for young people, difficulties for those with pre-existing mental health issues, and an increase in reports of suicidal ideation. The impact of the pandemic and its effect, lockdowns, an economic downturn, and social isolation on mental health could be felt for years to come. Megan Specia, New York Times, December 6, 2020. Introduction. We've all been there at one time or another, caught in the sense of being alone and far apart from others, leaving us feeling lost, anxious, or depressed. This is commonly known as social isolation, physical separation and removal from the friends and family who know us and on whom we can rely and trust, causing us great emotional distress. If any of this strikes a familiar note, this book is for you. We weren't meant to live this way, in isolation. We were designed to be social beings, wired to seek out relationships with others and rely on them for communal protection and self-preservation. As Dr. Vivek Murthy reviews for us in his book, Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. He reminds us that our earliest ancestors learned to recognize who around them is safe and trustworthy, and who is a threat to be avoided. Ancient tribes and villages banded together and were there for one another in obtaining food, shelter, support, and protection, as well as in providing a community to help raise children and care for seniors. Forming relationships is a fundamental human need, an inborn matter of well-being and survival, and its essence continues to this day. You can imagine that not having essential personal and social connections can feel devastating to a person. Social isolation puts us on guard, looking for constant threat, increases our vigilance, and affects our sense of safety, belonging, vulnerability, and anxiety. It's an unfamiliar and unpleasant experience that may result in physical and mental illness such as heart disease, stroke, obesity, sleep disorders, premature mortality, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, cognitive decline, and other conditions. Many factors can contribute to social isolation and loneliness. For example, in modern life, we have drifted away from living in villages and small towns where the entire community looks out for and nurtures each other, and that has resulted in rising levels of seclusion and loneliness in our society. Many of us now live in big cities and may be far away from family, cautiously leaning on a few new, untested friends for support. In addition, our lives are affected by life transitions and disruptions, general medical events, race, ethnicity, and cultural issues, as well as pre-existing mental health conditions, all of which can contribute to a feeling of isolation. One example of events causing isolation in our current era has been the recent COVID-19 pandemic, caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2. COVID-19 has caused a worldwide health crisis that began in December 2019 and rapidly spread, with a major impact on us personally, medically, emotionally, socially, and economically. The threat of infection with this potentially lethal virus has caused us to change the way we live, significantly disrupting the lives and daily routines of all persons, whether or not infected. It's a cause of monumental stress, newfound fear, and anxiety in many. In response, most of us have dutifully remained at home, worked remotely when possible, homeschooled our children, wore face masks, followed hand-washing guidelines, kept a physical distance from others, and limited the number of people who gather in any one place. In other words, we intentionally isolated ourselves. There is a cost to living like this in a world of constant threat to our health and way of life, worrying about the health and well-being of our loved ones, managing the personal, financial, and economic challenges during these times, and watching it unfold in the media. Our relationships, sense of connectedness, employment opportunities, and social/recreational activities and interactions have suffered. Some of us have feared being in public places, work settings, shopping centers and transportation systems, or medical center waiting, procedure, and exam rooms, all places where we might become infected during the pandemic. Others have, unfortunately, put off receiving medical evaluation, diagnostic tests, procedures, and treatment for their general health, resulting in a delay in diagnosis and treatment of potentially serious medical conditions. While being alone for short periods can sometimes be restorative and helpful, unintentional or involuntary isolation often has a negative effect on our emotional health. Most of the life changes that accompany the COVID-19 pandemic have had a negative effect on our mental health, and similar to other infectious disease outbreaks requiring isolation, increased our levels of anxiety, loneliness, grief, depression, suicidality, PTSD, and substance abuse. We saw this in a survey of U.S. adults done in 2018, before the pandemic, and again in April 2020, in which researchers found that levels of psychological distress and loneliness were higher during the pandemic than before. Mental health symptoms may appear in those who have or have not been directly infected with or exposed to the coronavirus or encountered social isolation. Symptoms may appear in those who have or have not experienced a prior episode of mental illness. Some COVID-19 survivors may suffer short-term yet disabling mental health effects. In others, the impact can be long-lasting, well beyond the physical effects of the virus or period of isolation, leading to PTSD and chronic mental health symptoms. Yet some experts predict that while the mental health effects of social isolation and of the COVID-19 crisis in particular will be significant, many persons will be resilient, able to cope with this stressor, and eventually recover naturally, moving on to a new normal and a satisfying life. What's their secret? Understanding the mental health consequences of isolation and loneliness from all causes, including infectious disease outbreaks like COVID-19, enables us to help ourselves and others affected now in our current era and in the future. Many strategies can reduce both the short and long-term distress caused by these events. That is the focus of this book, in which I present ways to recognize, prevent, and manage the mental health effects of social isolation, along with interventions that have been of value during past events and are likely to be useful now. How can this book help you? The aim of this book is to help you better understand the negative effects of isolation in you and your family, offer practical everyday mental health recommendations and self-care strategies for dealing with this, provide guidance on the major types of professional mental health care and mental health providers, and advise you on what to do when someone refuses treatment or has suicidal thoughts. It's a practical guide written for the general public with a focus on dealing with social isolation using our collective experience of the COVID-19 pandemic and its effects on us as an example. This book is based on scientific literature and my interviews with clinical experts in the field. 4 actively practicing therapists whose professional experiences and recommendations for dealing with social isolation are scattered throughout this book. In writing, I relied on these interviews and the scientific evidence to provide information useful to you in your daily life. It is not meant to be a comprehensive textbook on the subject. One question I consider is, why are some people more susceptible to emotional distress and develop a debilitating emotional response during or following social isolation, while others seem to cope better and are able to move on? One answer, proposed by Southwick and Charney in their book Resilience, The Science of Maintaining Life's Greatest Challenges, lies in building and maintaining resilience, which is the ability to bounce back after adversity and is covered in Chapter 12 of this book. In their work, Southwick and Charney learned that those who have resilience all tend to use the same or similar coping strategies during moments of high stress. The authors identified 10 coping strategies that have proved effective in dealing with stress and trauma. These include confronting your fears, maintaining an optimistic but realistic outlook, accepting social support, attending to your own health and well-being, including physical exercise, and other factors. While this list may seem overwhelming, try not to worry if you feel you don't have strong resiliency skills right now. I will walk you through them and show you how, with a little effort and direction, you can improve your resilience. Reconnecting after isolation is divided into 2 parts. Part 1 covers how social isolation affects us. It begins in Chapter 1 with a definition and an overview of isolation and loneliness and their impact on you, followed by the effect of social isolation on mental health, using the COVID-19 pandemic as an example. Chapter 2 covers emotional distress, functional impairment, and stress, and includes effective coping strategies for social isolation and for the pandemic in particular. In Chapter 3, I present the concept of fear and effective steps to face our fears. Then fatigue and burnout are the focus of Chapter 4, with helpful recommendations to avoid burnout. Next comes a discussion of bereavement and grief, with grief coping strategies for yourself and your children. Chapter 6 looks at how social isolation can affect our mental health and includes depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other conditions, along with a section on how to manage your mental health and deal with stigma. Chapter 7 explores suicidal thoughts and impulses, and Chapter 8 is devoted to substance use disorder. The focus of Part 2 is on what you can do to help yourself. It begins with understanding the underlying basics of mental health in Chapter 9. The basics are a series of daily steps we all need to maintain our emotional health and stability, including sleep, diet, exercise, having a routine and structure, and connecting with others. I encourage you all to increase your social supports and build structure and purpose into your day. This may seem like an overwhelming task to you at the moment, but it is possible to do if you approach it in small steps, one at a time. Next, in Chapter 10, you will learn about finding the optimal kinds of professional mental health providers and methods of treatment for you or a loved one, how to access them, how to tell if you're getting better, and what to do if someone refuses treatment or you cannot afford to pay for it. Chapter 11 explores various talk therapy options or psychotherapy. Then in Chapter 12, we look at building and maintaining resilience, which helps to control and stabilize our mental health. Finally, Chapter 13 addresses re-entry anxiety, the uneasiness we may experience upon returning to our usual daily life and activities after isolation, such as during the COVID-19 pandemic. The book closes with some final thoughts I have on mental health care and access. I encourage you not to fear reaching out for professional mental health evaluation and treatment if you develop any prolonged emotional symptoms that last longer than 2 weeks, cause you distress, or interfere with your daily functioning. 4 mental health experts graciously agreed to be interviewed by me for this book and offered much valuable insight on the experience of social isolation and its treatment options. I am most grateful to them for their generosity and thoughtful contributions. My interview process was to speak with each person privately over Zoom, record our conversation with their permission, and take careful notes. Relevant sections from our conversation were then inserted into this book. These mental health professionals are Thea Gallagher, PsyD, Director of Outpatient Clinic, Center for the Treatment and Study of Anxiety, Perelman School of Medicine, University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Douglas Katz, Ph.D., Department of Psychiatry, Director of Psychology, Doughton Family Center for Bipolar Treatment Innovation, Massachusetts General Hospital, Instructor in Psychology, Harvard Medical School, Boston, Massachusetts. Sheila Rausch, Ph.D., Professor, Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, Clinical Director, Emory Healthcare Veterans Program, Emory University School of Medicine, Atlanta, Georgia. Board of Directors, Anxiety and Depression Association of America, ADAA. Wendy Silverman, Ph.D., Professor, Yale Child Study Center and Professor of Psychology. Director, Yale Child Study Center Program, Anxiety and Mood Disorders Program. Yale University School of Medicine, New Haven, Connecticut. Part 1. How does social isolation affect me? Chapter 1. What is social isolation? I begin this book with the premise that we are all social beings and need personal connection with others to survive and thrive. Meaningful, genuine relationships are essential to our well-being and allow us to share purpose, interests, pursuits, and personal values with others. Getting together and interacting with our friends, colleagues, and family provides us with many benefits, such as a feeling of acceptance, increased self-esteem, a chance for friendship and fun, and access to someone who can provide support if we need it. This kind of social contact and support helps us maintain our emotional health and protects us from developing or worsening episodes of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and other mental illness. The opposite, social isolation and physical separation, is not healthy for us or our brains, and we flounder. Social isolation can be brought on by changes in our personal life circumstances. Some experiences that can lead to social isolation include general medical events. For example, social isolation occurs when we're stuck at home on crutches for months with a broken leg, confined to bed rest for months during a difficult pregnancy, after we've had a stroke or physical disability, when we're in the midst of certain cancer therapies, following a bone marrow transplant, or having physical challenges that limit our mobility, hearing, or vision. Life transitions and disruptions. We may feel more isolated when we lose a loved one, move to a new town or remote location, or retire from work, graduate into the elderly years or move to a nursing home, adapt to a pandemic such as COVID-19 and live with social distancing restrictions, become a victim of intimate partner violence, experience unemployment with associated perceived shame, and other life events. Race, ethnicity, cultural, religious, and gender differences can cause feelings of isolation and being left out of the mainstream of society. Mental illness. Isolation is often associated with pre-existing depression, anxiety, social anxiety disorder, and other conditions. These can contribute to or be a result of social isolation and loneliness. In a world where we depend on social interactions, we will nevertheless still spend some time alone, and all alone time is not the same. When our alone time comes from social isolation, it can have negative consequences on our physical and mental health, and ideally must be avoided. Spending some time alone each day, however, without feeling lonely, can be beneficial. Solitude, rather than isolation, has a purpose and is often soothing and rejuvenating. Solitude allows us to think, self-reflect, relax, and replenish ourselves, especially when we're overwhelmed. It's something we choose to experience, in contrast to the involuntary isolation of mental illness, a pandemic, or a major life disruption. We all need a bit of solitude or restorative alone time in our lives. A quiet walk outdoors alone in nature, meditation, prayer, art, music, reading, or working on a favorite hobby can be soothing and provide us with a sense of contentment, peace, and renewal. Even though solitude is alone time, it is not the same as the isolation and withdrawal that comes from stressful life events. Sometimes we are stressed and involuntarily find ourselves having to deal with social isolation, physically separated from others, including the friends and family we rely on and trust. It steals our sense of belonging and connectedness with those who know us well. Social isolation is linked closely to loneliness. Think of loneliness as an overwhelming feeling of being cut off and apart from others, where no one knows you well and you're unable to connect with them on a deeper level. Loneliness is sometimes referred to as perceived social isolation, our view or experience of being alone. It can occur regardless of who or how many people are included in your social circle or home life, and can even be felt while you're in a crowd, on the subway, or in the classroom. And the reverse is true. A person can be physically isolated from others by choice, living a solitary life, and not feel lonely. For example, if you're a fisherman at sea for prolonged periods or a long-distance truck driver hauling goods, since it's your chosen life, you're likely to be content and not feel lonely. Dr. Jeremy Nobel of Harvard Medical School and the director of the Unlonely Project defines loneliness as the self-perceived gap between the social connections one wants to have and what one is actually experiencing. Loneliness can affect us on many levels, causing both physical and emotional symptoms. It's often associated with psychological distress, increasing our risk of impaired mental health, depression, anxiety, suicidal behavior, sleep problems, disturbed appetite, and other symptoms. Feeling lonely can lead to a decline in our sense of well-being and our concentration, decision-making, and problem-solving abilities. Loneliness also has an impact on our physical health that is comparable to tobacco smoking, poor eating habits, obesity, and a sedentary lifestyle. Perceived social isolation or loneliness may cause us to feel unsafe and hypervigilant, constantly on the lookout for new threats. We might view the social world as a menacing and frightening place and expect to have negative social interactions, further distancing ourselves from others and reinforcing our loneliness. Yet experiencing loneliness may also motivate us to connect more with others. This is one way we have adapted over the centuries to ensure our safety and survival. There are thought to be 3 dimensions of loneliness, described by Dr. Vivek Murthy in Together, and reported in the scientific literature. Experiencing any one of these can make us feel lonely. Intimate or emotional loneliness, longing for a close confidant or intimate partner. Relational or social loneliness, yearning for quality friendships and social companionship and support. Collective loneliness, desiring a network or community of people who share our sense of purpose and interests. Many things can contribute to our feeling isolated or lonely, It's believed to be a combination of our genes, past experiences, current circumstances, culture and community, and individual personality characteristics. Traditions and our culture affect the quality of our connections by shaping our social expectations and attitudes. Loneliness can occur when our lived experience fails to meet our social expectations for love, friendship, and community that are set by family, friends, schools, workplaces, neighborhoods, television, and media. For example, if a person has come to expect that they will have a spouse and children, they will likely feel lonely and distressed if that doesn't happen. Loneliness has been increasing in our society even before the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, in a 2019 national survey of Americans, 61% reported feeling lonely, up from 54% in 2018. The Cigna survey report noted the following factors contribute to loneliness: a lack of social support, too few meaningful social interactions, negative feelings about one's personal relationships, poor physical and mental health, a lack of balance in one's daily activities, doing too much or too little of any given thing, e.g., sleep, work. Jeremy Nobel points out that stigma and silence make loneliness more difficult to deal with, and that some people are ashamed and embarrassed about being lonely. He writes that many perceive loneliness as their own fault, attributable to falling short in some way, to not being worthy of friendship, attention, or authentic connection to others. Essentially, it's something to be ashamed of. As a result, many don't talk about their loneliness. Those who live in cultures that promote self-reliance as a virtue have found this to be particularly true. For example, many adult men have been raised to appear strong and independent, as are many athletes, professionals, and certain societies and cultural or social groups. So when they feel lonely, they struggle in silence. The risks and impact of social isolation. An abundance of scientific literature describes the risks and impact of social isolation on our physical and mental health. Researchers have found associations between isolation and increased heart and cardiovascular disease, systolic blood pressure, cholesterol, mortality, inflammatory disease, weakened immune function, and impaired sleep. They have also found isolation-related increases in dementia and cognitive decline, stress and increased cortisol, stress hormone levels, depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicidal thoughts, and other mental illness. Those experiencing loneliness are found to be less likely to be physically active or care for themselves and are more likely to smoke tobacco, be obese, and abuse alcohol, all leading to an increase in physical and mental health problems. Social isolation and loneliness can have a negative effect on many areas of modern life. Two are explored next. Disruptions in daily living and routines. Social isolation strikingly changes our daily life and activities. Home, work, and social life suffer. Our usual patterns of sleep, diet, and exercise turn into late nights or interrupted sleep, grazing for food all day instead of eating 3 healthy meals, and exercise limited to walking around the neighborhood, if that. We may fear and avoid going to a restaurant, retail shop, church or synagogue, gym or exercise class with others, so we remain at home. During periods of social isolation, we often lack routine, structure, and purpose in the endless days of confinement. This presents a risk to our mental health. It's thought that disruption of our daily routine, even small changes, places stress on the body's ability to maintain emotional stability, and that those who have mental illness may have a more difficult time adapting to these changes in routine. Paying close attention to daily routines and to the positive and negative events that influence those routines and cause us stress increases our stability. Social isolation affects the lives of many children and adolescents. They may be experiencing prolonged time away from their friends, teachers, relatives.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?